Welcome to the Military Situation Room. In this report, we will walk through the most important developments from the latest period, looking closely at political decisions, strategic shifts, escalation events, and the current battlefield situation. The goal, as always, is to present the facts with clarity and provide a balanced analysis of what these changes may mean moving forward. Over the past few days, several updates have surfaced that caught the attention of analysts and observers across different regions. Some of these developments were expected, but others emerged quietly and unexpectedly, raising new questions about where the situation is heading next. These shifts are subtle, but together they form a pattern worth examining closely. The most significant political news centers on statements and actions taken by senior leadership in both Moscow and Minsk. Reports indicate that Belarusian leadership has been engaged in a series of internal discussions focused on national security, regional obligations, and military readiness. While the official announcements avoided any dramatic language, the messaging suggested that Belarus is adjusting several key positions behind the scenes. These include restructuring advisory councils, reviewing certain cross-border arrangements, and re-evaluating how future cooperation will be handled. Media analysts in Eastern Europe noted that the tone of these statements was noticeably calm but firm. Some outlets described the rhetoric as quiet repositioning, suggesting that Belarus is preparing for a shift in regional responsibility without openly challenging any partners. Other observers interpreted the announcements as a sign that Minsk is trying to strengthen its own room for maneuver, giving itself more leverage in upcoming talks with Moscow. At the same time, Russian leadership made a series of brief but carefully worded remarks that attracted immediate attention. In particular, the Kremlin emphasized the importance of strategic continuity in the Western region, a phrase that analysts generally interpret as signaling long-term planning rather than short-term reaction. Russian political commentators debated whether this wording indicates a new initiative, a defensive adjustment, or simply a reminder that Moscow is paying close attention to developments along its western borders. International outlets tended to describe it as a measured but deliberate communication. Diplomatically, these signals are being interpreted through multiple lenses. On one hand, they could reflect routine internal alignment discussions. On the other hand, the simultaneous timing of Belarus announcements and Russia's phrasing raised questions about coordination and long-term strategy. Several think tanks pointed out that both states appear to be preparing for a period of regional unpredictability, taking steps now that would allow them to respond more flexibly later. None of the announcements show open disagreement, but they do show increasing emphasis on strategic independence within the partnership. These political developments have broad implications for negotiations and alliances in the region. If Belarus is indeed creating more diplomatic space for itself, that could affect how future talks between Russia and neighboring states unfold. For example, any shift in Belarusian participation could influence the structure of security guarantees, the staging of joint exercises, or the distribution of military responsibilities. Analysts also noted that if Russia is reinforcing its strategic messaging, it may be preparing to adjust its negotiation posture, either to strengthen its influence or to preempt any unexpected changes from partners. Several possible outcomes are being discussed. One is that Belarus could take a more assertive role in regional diplomacy, using its position between Russia and Europe to appeal to both sides selectively. Another possibility is that Russia may accelerate its own military planning in the region, aiming to offset any unpredictability by ensuring stronger direct control over key strategic corridors. Alternatively, both states could simply be preparing for a long period of caution, maintaining flexibility without changing any major commitments. The key point is that these signals are subtle but deliberate, and they will likely shape political dynamics for months to come. As political developments unfolded, several escalation events were also reported, involving air activity, drone activity, and localized disturbances near certain border zones. Initial reports described a series of drone flights over contested areas, some of which were intercepted according to regional authorities. Local sources counted multiple launches within a short time frame, indicating that these incidents were not isolated. Most of the attacks were small in scale, but they contributed to growing tension in surrounding areas. In addition to drone incidents, there were also reports of artillery exchanges near a frontline sector. These exchanges appeared limited but occurred in clusters, suggesting coordinated probing attempts. Local authorities reported disruptions to infrastructure, including communication lines and minor transportation points. While the damage appears relatively contained, the timing of these exchanges raises questions about whether certain groups are testing response times or attempting to create pressure ahead of future operations. There were also unverified reports of a naval disturbance involving radar activity in the Baltic region. While no damage or casualties were confirmed, the event drew attention from monitoring groups because it occurred shortly after the political announcements in Minsk and Moscow. Naval observers pointed out that such incidents sometimes occur during periods of increased strategic signaling, though no direct link has been established. These escalation events, although not large scale, contributed to a sense that the region is entering a more active phase. The combination of drone flights, artillery exchanges, and naval radar anomalies suggests rising tension and increased monitoring by all sides. With these escalation reports in mind, the battlefield situation also saw several notable developments. Beginning in the northern sector, sources reported small shifts in forward positions along the forested approaches. Several reconnaissance units on both sides adjusted their lines after brief engagements, resulting in modest advances and withdrawals. Nothing in this sector indicates a large offensive, but the consistent movement suggests ongoing contest for control of elevated terrain and observation points. Further east, the central axis experienced slightly more intense activity. Multiple sources confirmed that several platoon-sized elements conducted coordinated assaults on defensive positions. These actions resulted in small territorial gains for one side, though counter-assaults quickly reclaimed part of the contested ground. The overall shape of the front line in this sector changed only marginally, but the frequency of engagements has increased compared to previous weeks. In the southeastern sector, analysts reported tactical adjustments around a series of ridges and river-adjacent settlements. Control of these areas is crucial due to their commanding views over supply routes. According to mapping groups, one side pushed forward by several hundred meters in certain sections, gaining access to better covered approaches. Meanwhile, the opposing side strengthened its defensive trenches, creating layered fortifications intended to absorb any further advances. These actions reflect a cautious but determined struggle for positional advantage. Moving westward, the situation near a cluster of villages saw repeated attempts to probe weak spots in defensive lines. These attempts did not result in major breakthroughs, but they did cause several frontline sections to shift slightly. Observers noted that one particular settlement changed hands temporarily before being reclaimed. This back and forth movement illustrates that both sides are testing each other's readiness while avoiding overcommitment. In the southern axis, the situation remained relatively stable, though there were notable logistical adjustments. Some units were reported repositioning closer to fortified zones, likely preparing for future deployments. Monitoring groups reported new vehicle activity on several supply roads, suggesting reinforcements or resupply efforts underway. No major offensives were reported, but the overall posture indicates preparation rather than disengagement. Mapping interpretations suggest that the frontline shape has experienced subtle but meaningful changes. In the northern sector, gradual advances toward tree lines have created a more curved front line, giving one side better control over flanking angles. In the central axis, the oscillating gains and losses have slightly widened the contested gray zone, increasing uncertainty about which side holds firm control of specific pockets. In the southeastern sector, the new footholds near elevated terrain have opened potential avenues for future tactical maneuvers. While these changes are not dramatic, they accumulate into a shifting landscape that analysts are watching closely. These tactical adjustments point to emerging vulnerabilities and opportunities. For example, the newly secured elevated areas may give one side an advantage in artillery direction, while the expanded gray zones create challenges for both reconnaissance and defense. Similarly, the reinforced trenches in the southeastern axis may absorb initial attacks, but could become vulnerable if flanking attempts succeed elsewhere. Each of these factors feeds into the broader strategic outlook. Looking more broadly, both sides appear to be preparing for possible operational shifts. Based on observed movements, one side may be considering reinforcing its central axis to secure contested pockets before they expand further. Meanwhile, the other side may be planning defensive deepening in the southeastern sector to prevent any exploitation of recent geographical gains. The political context, particularly the strategic signaling from Belarus and Russia, may also influence upcoming decisions. If Belarus is adjusting its posture, military planners on all sides may anticipate changes in coordination, supply lines, or strategic prioritization. Some analysts argue that the current stage represents a build-up toward a more active winter operational period. Others suggest that the incremental moves reflect an attempt to stabilize lines before making any major decisions. Either way, the combination of political repositioning, escalation incidents, and tactical adjustments indicates that the region is preparing for a new phase. In summary, the latest period brought several major developments. Politically, Belarus and Russia issued calm but deliberate signals that may reshape upcoming diplomatic and strategic interactions. These messages suggest preparation, caution, and an interest in maintaining flexibility. Escalation events, including drone activity, artillery exchanges, and naval radar disturbances, added to regional tension and highlighted the growing complexity of the situation. On the battlefield, multiple sectors saw small but meaningful shifts, creating new tactical dynamics and influencing how each side approaches future operations. As these factors interact, the coming weeks may reveal whether the region is entering a period of increased confrontation or strategic recalibration. Thank you for following this analysis from the Military Situation Room. If you would like to stay updated with future reports, feel free to subscribe, like, and join us for the next briefing.